take care of yourselves and I'll see you on the other side. That was his Facebook post. That still sends chills down my spine because that turned out to be the last Facebook post Charlie ever posted. It was about 1:00 that I woke up and he just wasn't breathing right. After he had got in the ambulance, Rebecca looked at me and she said, "Is Daddy going to be okay?" And I looked at her and said, "I don't know."
Hello and welcome to A Normal Family, a podcast collecting and retelling true family stories with lessons for us all. This week, I'm chatting with my former colleague, Emma Charlesworth. Emma's been through a lot, facing cancer, coping with miscarriage, and losing her husband, Charlie, to COVID. She opens up about how therapy and EMDR have changed her for the better, and why you should talk honestly with children about grief. If you've experienced loss, Emma's story will remind you it's fine to feel what you feel, and that there's life after loss. Hello, Emma, and thank you for joining me. Just to start by saying where we both are, I am currently sat in the village of Duxford in Cambridge, where I'm doing a house sit.
Amazing. So I am out in Kent, it's where I grew up. It's currently in my office at the top of the house, hiding away from everyone.
I think you and Charlie started dating in 99, but you knew each other before that, is that right?
We did. We met on the terraces of the local football team, Sittingbourne FC. I had been going down there since I was 11. My granddad had taken me. We first met back in 96. And then our friendship just grew. We got together the day before my 18th birthday party. I would go on to joke that I just needed a date for my 18th birthday party. And that, I guess, is
long
how
date.
it was a long day. It ended up being 21 years and it wasn't an easy 21 years. And there was a lot that happened during our time together. We got married in 2005. Charlie was diagnosed with cancer in 2001. It was testicular cancer, but by the time it was caught, it had spread. He had 3 tumours around his aorta, his kidney and his liver. So he had to undergo really intensive chemotherapy. He had major surgery and he had to have one of the testicles was removed. The second surgery after the chemotherapy, we didn't know if he was going to lose a leg. His first chemo session was on my 20th birthday. And I didn't really know how to deal with it, if I'm honest. The following year, I called time on our relationship because it sounds really cliched, but I just lost sight of who I was in all of that. We were apart for about 3-4 months. During the start of 2003, we eventually got back together. Found he proposed March 2004 and we got married September 2005.
So you got married and then you had Rebecca a few years after that?
We did. So Rebecca was born in 2010. She was a much wanted and longed for baby and it took us a very long time, about 18 months before I even fell pregnant. That wasn't necessarily a surprise because of Charlie's chemo. We had been for a number of tests. They had toyed with whether we would need to go down an IVF route, but she was a natural baby and Charlie adored her. The man was born to be a father. He'd wanted it from such a young age.
And you also shared, Emma, I hope you don't mind talking about it, that you had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
Nearly 2 years after Rebecca had been born.
So we'd always wanted more than one child. And bizarrely enough, I fell pregnant pretty much straight away with our second child. And I had what's called a missed miscarriage. So basically,
I've never heard that before.
That means is that the baby dies, but your body doesn't recognize it. There's no bleeding. There's nothing to indicate that you might have had a miscarriage. So the first we knew about it was when we went for our 12-week scan. And that's when we were told. The odd thing is that I think on some level I knew. And I can remember saying to Charlie a couple of days before, I don't feel pregnant anymore. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. You're almost at 12 weeks. So they did the scan and I can remember no one spoke to us whilst this scan was happening. And that was when I knew that something wasn't right because with Rebecca, people had been talking like, oh, your baby's doing this, your baby's doing that. Whereas with this scan, there was nothing. I can't remember what they said after, I'm very sorry. But I remember those 3 words and then it was all a blur. I was given choices of what I wanted to do. So I then had surgery 2 days later. And all I wanted at that point was to be pregnant again. My body took a long time to recover.
I've spoke to some other women who have had miscarriages and it's one of those areas that's still stigmatized and isn't talked about very much. You don't have the space to talk about it or grieve in the way that you need to. I wondered if that resonated with you.
100%. So I I didn't tell anybody at work.
Yeah.
I told my line manager because obviously after having surgery, I had to take some time out. So I was out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then I went back to work. Nobody knew. I didn't tell anybody in my team. And it wasn't because I was ashamed of it. It was just I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want sympathy. And I didn't want people feeling sorry for me, I think. And so I
Is
chose
that
to
the type
keep
of
it.
person that you are?
Yeah, I
Is that
don't
your
want
kind of coping?
yeah, I don't want tea and sympathy. And obviously we'll come on to what's happened to me later in life, but I think I've had to change. But back then I just wanted to carry on with my life and not not let this be a thing. 100% the wrong decision. 100% the wrong decision.
Okay.
Because it meant I never dealt with it. One of the things that I really struggled with was knowing what I was grieving.
Okay.
Because this baby wasn't a person. I'd never met them. I don't even know what gender they were. In my head, it was a boy because Rebecca's pregnancy was successful and she was a girl. I don't know that. That's just in my head. I know Charlie as well found it very difficult. To him, it was almost harder because he hadn't felt pregnant. He hadn't had all of the body changes. So
It was even more abstract,
it was even more
perhaps.
abstract and imaginary. And I think that generally does happen with men. Men tend to
Yeah.
be forgotten with miscarriages, but we just kind of carried on.
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you've had lots of loss in your life,
I
Emma.
have.
So let's keep pressing ahead. In 15, you take the decision that you're happy with the three of you.
Mhm.
Is there anything of note before we come to 2020 and COVID?
Not really. That was
Happy
just our
normal
life.
family. Normal
Happy
family.
yeah, as normal a family as you can be. You know, I worked full time, Charlie worked, we were in a real rhythm. He was a really hands-on dad. But yeah, nothing really to note. We were just a normal family.
So talk me through those first weeks leading up to Charlie's hospitalisation. I think we can all remember how quickly everything happened in
Yeah,
early
and
2020.
2020, it feels like forever and no time at all. If we all think back to the start of the pandemic, it was happening in China and then there were cases in Italy and we were all watching it get more serious. And that might sound like a naive thing to say, but I don't think any of us really expect things like this to affect us personally. Charlie, as he'd already had cancer, you just don't think these things are going to happen.
Did he at that stage even think of himself as a vulnerable person?
No, no, we weren't vulnerable. If I'm being completely honest, he was more worried about his dad getting ill. He didn't view himself as vulnerable. And I can remember, month of March, we were in the supermarket and there was no pasta, there was no anti-bac wipes, there was no hand gel. One of the staff was saying that people had been buying condoms to put on their fingers because they'd run out of gloves. It was just this most surreal shopping trip. And Charlie said, I really fancy some chocolate. And I can remember saying to him, I'll just pop it in the trolley because if coronavirus doesn't kill us, the asteroid that, I was told about this week will. So you might as well just eat the chocolate. One of those flippant 21 years together conversations. And it wasn't that I wasn't taking it seriously, it's that it just felt the most surreal situation that
Yeah.
we were all living through. Just
Was
felt
happening over there in
it
the
was happening
television
over,
set.
and I don't think any of us really anticipated how serious it was going to become. So it was just one of those conversations that you have after 21 years together. That was the 7th of March. And Rebecca went to school for the last time on the 20th of March. And Charlie and I had been having disagreements about whether to continue sending her to school. I was incredibly worried about her mental health, being an only child. Charlie was worried about the pandemic and her being at school and being exposed. And then on the 22nd of March, which was Mothering Sunday, Charlie had a high temperature. And we started to think, well, maybe you've got it. But there was no way of knowing because there were no
Of
lateral flow
course.
tests. You weren't actually allowed to see a doctor if you thought you had it, so we did not know whether Charlie had COVID. We
I
just
forgot about
knew
that.
that he had a high temperature. He put a Facebook post out that day with a picture of Mickey Flanagan and turned it into a bit of a joke. Something like, so I've not been out in days, but I guess I'm now in. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you on the other side. That was his Facebook post. And that was how COVID entered our house and entered our world.
So sort of small, and still, even when it's there,
Yeah.
difficult to recognize the significance of what's coming.
Yeah. 100%.
How does that feel now in hindsight?
It still feels surreal. 100% surreal. That last sentence he wrote, "Take care of yourselves and I'll see you on the other side." That still sends chills down my spine. People use that phrase a lot. I've had friends who'll say on a Friday, "Oh, I'll see you on the other side," because it's after the weekend.
Yeah.
And I have to say to them, "Don't say that to me."
Yeah.
It
You're
still
feeling
affects
it in a
me.
much more spiritual.
That still affects me to this day, because that turned out to be the last Facebook post Charlie ever posted.
So Charlie has a temperature. You can't confirm whether or not it's COVID. What next steps do you take to protect him, to protect you in the best way you knew at that time?
We just had to roll with it. And it sounds
Yeah.
utterly ridiculous now to say that, but that was all we could do. We had to isolate. I don't think there was enough information at that time about how to manage COVID if you had it. The one thing Charlie never had was a cough. So that's what made it very hard for us to know, did he have it? Did he not have it? I was all of a sudden juggling, being at home, working full time, a child who was no longer at school, a sick husband. Over the course of that week, Charlie went steadily downhill. We went for a walk on the Monday, the 23rd, because you're allowed to go out for an hour a day at that point. We've got a selfie of the three of us. We just did it. I stayed in our bedroom with him. I didn't isolate. And actually, I am ridiculously glad that that was the route I took. We just managed it as best we could with the little information that there was. But he was going downhill, deteriorating. So on the Thursday night, I rang 111 and got their advice. And they said it does pretty much sound like he's got it, but there's no way of knowing for definite. Just continue to do what you're doing, etc., etc. Ring back if it gets more
Because I think at
serious.
that time as well, people were worried about being admitted in case you didn't have it and then you got it,
And then you
if I
got it.
remember correctly.
100%.
Yeah.
And then he just ended up sleeping most of the days. On the Sunday, which would have been the 29th, so a week after he came down with his temperature, as he was watching one of the Harry Potters with Rebecca. I made her sit at the different end of the sofa to him. She can remember that to this day because I wouldn't let her cuddle him. Obviously, if she was going to get it, she'd have got it from being in the same room as him. In my own head, I was trying to keep her safe. He was shaving in the bathroom. I went downstairs. I carried on ironing, put my Jason Donovan concert on to watch because I'm a massive Jason Donovan fan. And I was like, I just need something to make me smile. He finished shaving. He went to bed. I went to bed at about 11 o'clock. And then a few hours later, utter carnage broke out.
Okay. So talk us through that if you don't mind.
It was about 1 o'clock that I woke up and he just wasn't breathing right. You go to Dr. Google, don't you? I'd been doing a lot of research whereby people were saying COVID patients were suffering more at nighttime because they were sleeping so more during the day that at nighttime they could be verging on delusional because they'd then wake up out of sync. So even at that point, I didn't worry too much. We just put Springsteen on Broadway. It calmed him down. Then a couple of hours later, I woke up and it was almost like he was trying to cough something out of him. He was coughing and spitting into a tissue and then folding up the tissue and putting it to one side. He was talking and none of it was making sense. So I decided that I was going to bring the doctor. And up until that point, I was the person that turned their phone off every night and my phone was downstairs. By the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, I was like, screw this, I'm ringing an ambulance.
And what
Again,
made you feel that way?
I just felt panic. I can't describe it. Whether it was a sixth sense or not, I don't know. I was glad that I stayed in the same room as him because had I not been, I would not have seen any of this. So I called the paramedics. I asked for an ambulance. I said, I think my husband's having a panic attack. I just need someone to help me. By the way, 111 think he might have COVID. So at that point, they sent the ambulance out. Bear in mind, my daughter was 10. She's woken up to this carnage in the house. So I rang my mum and said, just talk to her. There's nothing else you can do. Just keep her on the phone. I still have a lot of guilt towards Rebecca about that night because I couldn't be with her. I couldn't be a mum. I couldn't cuddle her because I had to be with the paramedics. She was left on her own in the living room on the phone to my mum. So the paramedics came in. I described it to Rebecca that it was going to be like something out of ET I didn't know how else to describe it. They came in completely suited, face masks, the white suit, almost a bit like forensics,
Hmm.
feet covered, everything was covered. There were 3 of them.
Yeah, full hazmat suits.
2 of them in the bedroom, 1 stayed in the ambulance. I was running up and down the stairs trying to check on Rebecca, trying to answer their questions about Charlie. And at one point whilst they were there, his pupils dilated and his lips went blue. Again, another reason I was glad I was in the same room, because had I not rung 999, I am utterly convinced he'd have died in my bed, because they put an
Okay.
oxygen mask on him. After he'd been given oxygen, he had a whole conversation with me. They then said they needed to take him to the hospital to just check him. And he walked down the stairs, got into the ambulance, and that was that. I rang 2 hours later to be told by the time he got to A&E, he was so breathless, he had been taken to ITU, he had been sedated and was on a ventilator. I should also add at this point that it was my 39th birthday. So where he'd had his first chemo session on my 20th birthday, he went to ITU on my 30th.
Uncomfortable echoes.
Yeah, yeah. After he had got in the ambulance, Rebecca looked at me and she said, "Is Daddy going to be okay?" To this day, I don't know where I pulled it from, but something in my subconscious said, "Be honest with this child." And I looked at her and said, "I don't know." I said, "I
Mm,
promise you that the doctors and nurses will do everything they can to make Daddy be okay, but I can't promise you
mm,
that he will be." And then I
mm.
just hugged
That's
her.
really tough.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I find it really hard to hear, I guess, that you feel guilt towards your daughter when also your other role that evening was to be a wife
Yeah.
to Charlie and to
Yeah.
be there for him in what would ultimately be your last moments together. Have you talked with Rebecca about the guilt that you feel and what happened that night?
Yes and no. She knows I feel guilty. It's something I've got better at. I don't think it'll ever fully go away. I've had a lot of therapy to help me process what happened to us and to
Good?
help me deal with all kinds of guilt. I've sat and wondered, what if I'd have rung an ambulance at 1 o'clock rather than putting Broadway on? What if
Right.
it would not have made a difference? His body was so ravaged, 2 hours would not have made a difference. I had
Yeah.
spoken to 111 twice. I'd done everything I possibly could have done.
Yeah.
But she won't mind me saying that. She has had therapy as well, mainly because her grief manifested itself into anxiety that
Mm,
was not pleasant. But, she has read some stuff I've written, which helps her when she reads things about that time
of
rather than having that conversation, because it's an incredibly hard conversation to have
course.
face to face. But yeah,
So
I'm
there's
getting
perhaps
better with
a
managing it.
safety and a distance.
Safety and a
The
distance. Yeah.
safety and distance that comes with reading
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. So Charlie was hospitalized for 3 weeks before
Yeah.
he passed away. What it was like being in lockdown and isolated in a very physical and social sense from what you would normally want as a grieving wife.
Yeah. I think about it in 2 ways. One
Okay.
way, it meant we had no option but to process what was happening to us. There was no
Mm,
escapism. There was
right.
no way to distract ourselves. I couldn't go to the cinema. I couldn't take it to the theatre. Couldn't even get a takeaway. On the flip of that, from that very moment Charlie went into hospital, I went on the back burner. I worried about everybody else, not me. I became a mum. No one could come and take Rebecca. I had no let up, and so I just went into
Yeah.
survival mode.
Do you think, sorry, Emma, do you think there's part of you that was afraid to stop because then you create a gap for all those horrible feelings to rush in?
100%. It was easier, and it's really interesting you say that, because Rebecca participated in a child's grief study
Mm-hmm.
about 18 months later, and she told me one of the questions was, "How is Mummy dealing with this? How is Mummy?" And she said, "Mummy just keeps herself busy all the time. She doesn't stop. She
Hmm.
doesn't sit down, because if she did, she'd have to think about what's happened to us, and she doesn't want to do that."
Wow, that's perceptive of her.
Incredibly, that was my 11-year-old. She could work it out. She knew what I was
Yeah.
doing. I didn't. But I also think that that has been incredibly detrimental to me as a person, because I've not known how to not be in that mode, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
And do you still think that's the case now?
No, because I've had to front it up now. I've had to.
So how did you get from there to where you are now?
I reached a point towards the end of October last year where I realized that I had been running constantly. I was almost trying
Mm,
to live the life that we had before with 2 of us, with just me. I was too scared to say no to people in case it meant they didn't like me, or what happened if I didn't see them again, and just realized like it was not sustainable to carry on, and went back into therapy. For the first time, I'm having EMDR. So it's not bereavement
Mm.
counseling. It's helping me process the trauma that I went through. I
And
found
how
it
are
very
you finding
difficult to do.
EMB?
It's completely changing me, completely changing me.
Good,
You know, I can only talk about my personal experience and it might not work for everybody, but I can feel the
good.
difference, completely feel the difference.
Lessons.
I've learned the lessons. I've had to learn the lesson the hard way.
Yeah. And what about Rebecca's grief? How did that differ from yours? And how did you cope dealing with her grief, let alone your own?
Rebecca is incredibly pragmatic. She is incredibly astute. Rebecca did not cry when Charlie first died, queried herself why she wasn't crying. And I pointed out that everyone is different. You know,
Good
just because
advice.
I was crying at everything didn't mean she would. I just wanted her to be okay. I've said to her, it's part of who we
Mhm.
are, but it doesn't define us. You know, she doesn't get a free pass at life because her dad died when she was 10. She's still got to work hard. She can't go through life going, my dad died, therefore her and I will joke about playing the dead husband card and the dead daddy card and stuff like that. But, you know, it was very difficult because we are grieving the same person, but we are grieving different relationships.
Absolutely.
She's grieving the loss of her dad at the age of 10. I'm grieving the loss of my husband. He meant something completely different to both of us. I can't know what it's like for her to have lost her dad at the age of 10. And so that is something that is really difficult as a mother because you want to fix them, right? I can help us learn to live with it, but I can't bring him back. Rebecca has a wealth of stuff to come. She's going to learn to drive. She's got GCSE. She's got A levels. She may go to university. She may get married. She may have her own child. Every time one of those happens, he's not here.
Yeah. 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 That's very good to be conscious of. You talked about how your openness with your
Mm,
grief has changed
mm.
this time round to other times
Yeah.
that you've experienced loss. Can you talk a bit more about that
So it was a conscious decision this time round.
to approach it
I
differently?
to approach it differently. I can remember when Charlie died and the news was broken to my team at work, the messages I got and how everybody suddenly said this made the pandemic real. What I suddenly realized is we don't talk about grief. We don't talk about bereavement. We will all go through this at some point in our lives, yet we don't talk about it. And because it's too hard, it's one of the reasons that I chose to launch my blog. I joined the charity Widowed and Young. I've subsequently become an ambassador. And the one thing that we've learnt through that, talking about it, makes it okay. You might never meet these people, but see something that they've posted and you feel validated. You feel
Yeah.
normal. I was 39 when I was widowed. I'm not Queen Victoria. I don't wear black. I don't have a veil in front of my face. I don't sit and weep all the time. I live my life, but grief is a part of my life. You know, Rebecca
Mm,
won't really remember her life without grief in it. She won't really
mm.
remember me not grieving. So grief is a part of our life.
People talk about turning pain into purpose or pain into power. And I think
Hmm.
that you're a great illustration of that. Have you got any examples of where you telling your story has touched somebody else?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, my blog won the Widowed and Young Helen Bailey Award for the best blog. I was nominated for it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was nominated for it 2 years in a row and I won it on the second year. And I think that for me was incredibly humbling because I started doing it to help me process and to help me understand what I was going through. And when you get messages from people saying, I don't know if you need to hear this, but you've helped a stranger today, that is incredibly powerful. I still find it staggering that my random thoughts from my head can have that effect. I could have ever envisaged when I first started that blog.
Yeah, writing is a form of therapy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It helps us to talk to people, but actually writing is as valid a form of communication to work out what's going on in here
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
put it in a way that we can understand ourselves, let alone for other people.
Yeah.
And on your blog, I think that you talked even positive can come from nightmares. Is this the sort of thing that you have in mind when you write a line like that?
Yeah, I think so. There will always be light, no matter how dark life can get. I still have, God willing, an awful lot of my life to live, and I have to live it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always been, since Charlie died, I've been quite adamant that he won't be a statistic of the pandemic. We've done a huge amount of fundraising since Charlie died as well. Something positive has got to come out of this nightmare. We can't have gone through this for nothing. And
Yeah.
that, I think,
It's amazing how common that feeling is.
I think is a very powerful legacy for Charlie to have left as well.
You talked about when you were 20 and he was hospitalised with his testicular cancer, where you are today. What would you go back and say to that 20-year-old self?
Ask for help.
Wow. Very simple, but very powerful.
Yeah. Ask for help. You know, if I had £1 for every time I've been called brave or strong, I'd be an incredibly rich woman. And I got about 6 months into widowhood and was ready to punch the next person that called me brave or strong, because I felt it was really patronizing. I've got to do this. I haven't chosen this. I've not gone out there and said, hey, do you know what would be a really good test? Let my husband die and see how I do it. And so I got quite angry about brave or strong. But with the benefit of time and the longer you go through this, I can now sit here and say to you, I am incredibly strong.
Absolutely, you are.
I am an incredibly strong person, but some of that strength comes from my vulnerability now. Strong doesn't mean you don't break down. Strong doesn't mean you don't ask for help and you try and do everything on your own. Strong is going, no, this is really tough and I can't do it on my own. And strong, that asking for help is a strength in itself.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Emma.
Yeah.
I want to come back to it because I know that you're passionate about it. The fact that you are now a solo parent. Can you define what you see as a solo parent versus what we would normally refer to as a single parent?
I can understand why people that aren't in my situation might think I'm being a bit difficult. But to me, I am it. The buck stops with me. There's no good cop, bad cop anymore. I am it. I am responsible for everything, for finances, for decisions, for the school run, for absolutely everything is down to me when it comes to my daughter. There's not another parent that she can go and stay with. I know there are single parents that are in a very similar situation to me. They don't have that relationship with the other child's parents. So it's not that I'm generalizing, but I am it. I am solo and I'm quite passionate about that.
Do you envisage having another person in your life anytime soon?
Honestly, I'm not ever ruling it out, but I don't know. It is something Rebecca is very much against.
Interesting.
She has said I am not even allowed to consider it until we hit the 5-year mark, because in her head, 5 years is long enough. I said, we're not going to get to the 5-year mark and you're going to be okay with it. Whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, she's never going to want someone else coming into my life. And it's a really odd one for me. I got with Charlie my 18th birthday party. We were in a relationship bar a few months until I was 39. I had never been an adult without him. When he died, I did not know who I was. I had always been Charlie and Emma. Who was Emma? Not Emma the mum, Emma the wife. And I've been on that period of discovery for 5 years. I miss Charlie on a daily basis. I would give anything for the last 5 years not to have happened and for him to be back. But I've had to make a deal with the cards that I've been dealt. And I like the autonomy I have in my life now. I don't have to take someone else's opinion into consideration. I choose where we go on holiday. There's all these kinds of things that being on my own enables me to do. There will probably be people that listen to this and go, oh, did she ever love her husband? Because that's the judgment you face as a widow. You face judgment in a way I don't think you do if you've gone through a divorce. I live with my grief. It is a massive part of who I am, but I don't have a bad life. Do I feel the need to bring someone in? No, I don't even know how I'd fit them in, to be honest.
Fit that. Yeah.
Logistically, I like where I'm at with my 15-year-old now, but I'm also acutely aware in 3 years, Rebecca's going to university. I'll be on my own. That could be lonely.
You still deserve your own life.
I deserve my own life. So I don't ever rule anything out. And I think if I've learned anything, it's that life is unexpected. But yeah, I'm all right as I am.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're a similar age, Emma. I can name lots of women who feel exactly the same of you for different reasons, but exactly the same. And that's how we should be. Maybe that's the benefit of getting to our age, is that we finally get comfortable with ourselves and realize that somebody has to be additive rather than just there because that's what we're supposed to want or need.
I think that's exactly it. If there was to be someone, or I was to be in a relationship, or I was to meet someone, it's because they're adding something to my life They're not coming in because I've got a void. I don't have a void
Yeah.
other than the fact my husband died and I miss him all the time. So who is Emma?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's like still the $64 million question. Emma is someone who has gone through a hell of a lot in her life. She is a fighter. She is vulnerable. She's human. She has so much to give. And she's pretty phenomenal, to be honest. And that's not arrogance, but that's just a realization. You know, if a blog can help someone, you know, that's phenomenal. To be raising someone who is such an amazing child. I'm so, so proud of Rebecca to have done that against all odds, to be living again. I spent so long in survival mode and I actually feel I'm living now. I'm not just surviving. Phenomenal doesn't need to be massive achievements and changing the world. It's actually just doing what I've done against all odds.
And no doubt changing worlds, changing Rebecca's worlds, changing the worlds of the people who read your blog or inspired if they see you at a away event. I remember when we worked together, Emma, you were always such a can-do, positive person.
Yeah.
And I can understand that that might have been difficult to hold on to when you were going through the loss of Charlie. But I can see that it's still there. And I can see your colourful fingernails coming into shot every now and then. It's like,
Yeah.
it's absolutely the Emma that I remember.
Yeah.
And to not just survive, but to live, because of course it's not what Charlie would want for you or for Rebecca, would be that you would be stuck in with your veils. And you stole my line because I read that in one of your blogs that you said, oh, actually I am pretty phenomenal. I totally back you on that. You are pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wouldn't want his death to be what destroyed us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not what he would have wanted.
Amazing. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about, Emma, that I shouldn't miss?
I think the only other thing I would say that anyone listening to this that might be going through grief in whatever form is that it's not linear. You don't go through grief and start here and then go on a trajectory. That's not how grief works. And so just be kind to yourself and go
You're
with
actually in
whatever
good
emotion
company on
you're
that.
feeling.
There is actually a Harvard article that's come out recently. I can't remember the phraseology that was used, but it basically accepted that the 5 stages of grief, as we all learn, are somewhat misleading because it's not that singular trajectory where you're moving through stages one at a time. Something can trigger you to bounce back into a earlier stage or suddenly feel comfortable in a way that is not necessarily sustained.
Absolutely. And everyone does this differently. You know, it's like parenthood. It's individual, and trust your gut. You know how you need to survive this. So just don't compare yourself to anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice for life.
Yeah.
Emma, thank you. I've
Oh, no,
enjoyed
thank you for having me.
talking. And genuinely, kind of, it blows my mind, doesn't it? You just talked then about how you don't know what's going on with people and you might think that people are doing well. Like when you look at the ocean, even if it's calm, you don't know how strong the waves or the currents underneath might be.
Yeah.
And then I look back and think about all the times that we worked together, and obviously before Charlie had died even, but to know the loss that you'd already dealt with. We just never know, do we? What's all the people that we spend our daily lives with, what's going on beneath what can be a calm or happy or
Absolutely. And, you know,
surface level.
and I think there's always that, isn't it? It's that be kind, because everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And, you know, the logo for Widowed and Young is a swan. And that was specifically chosen because they look really graceful, but under the surface, their legs are battling away to swim and whatever.
Furiously.
And, you know, there will be friends that don't know that I'm going through the therapy again, because for a while I felt like a failure for going back into it, even though I'm such an advocate for it. I was like, I'm 4.5 years in, I shouldn't need to go back into therapy. So
there's those shoulds and unhelpful woulds, shoulda,
and all of those.
wouldas.
So there'll be people listening to this that will probably go, I didn't know this. But that's because now I'm in a position that I'm okay to talk about it.
Much good advice.
But yeah, the nails are for Jason, to be fair. I've got five dates between now and the 5th of April. So these are my 80s nails.
Oh my God. Where's he playing?
So tomorrow I'm seeing him at the Palladium. Next Saturday I'm going to York. Then 2 weeks later I'm going to Liverpool, then Canterbury, then Dublin. So I've got a lot
Oh
coming
my God,
up.
Emma.
It is slightly
Amazing.
It's got out of hand, Anna. I'm not going to lie to you about that. It was never meant by It was never
I mean,
meant to
that
be
says a
followed.
lot that you say it's got out of hand, because I seem to remember it was a pretty big thing when I worked
It
with you
was a
5
pretty
years
big thing,
ago.
but do you know what? Do you know what? He has been ever so good since Charlie died as well. He has been really, really good to me. I've had videos from him.
Oh,
He's been, and the friend I'm going with to the Palladium tomorrow, I'm only friends with her because of Jason. So we'd spoken on Twitter for years and years and years. She is absolutely my sort of person, and we are now incredibly good friends. So yeah, it's weird.
love
If
that.
only he knew what he was
Love that.
responsible for.
I'm sure you let me know what a force together you're going to be. Well, enjoy. I look forward to seeing how the meet and greet goes and if the nails last through to the final show. Emma,
Thank you. It
enjoy
was
the
so
rest of your
lovely to see you.
Sunday. Thank you
Thank
for being
you.
so open with me.
No worries.
Thank you to this week's guest for sharing their story, and to you for listening. Check out our show notes for more information on this topic, and please keep watching for more Unfiltered Families. And don't forget that you can get in touch if you think that you have a story to share.